welcome back to Ron Hasn't Seen. On this channel, I talk about movies I've seen for the first time that I probably should have seen a long time ago. And today I'm wrapping up our October Halloween series with 1994's Interview with the Vampire. Interview with the Vampire was directed by Neil Jordan and was written by Anne Rice based on her 1976 novel. It stars Tom Cruise as Lestat, Brad Pitt as Louis, Kirsten Dunst as Claudia, Kristen Slater as Daniel Malloy, and Antonio Banderas as Armand. The film is framed with the titular interview of Malloy interviewing Louis about his life as a 200-year-old vampire. Louis recounts his life as a plantation owner in southern Louisiana before he is seduced and turned to a vampire by Lestat. We follow their relationship in the 18th and 19th century New Orleans area, during which time Lestat also creates Claudia, a 10-year-old orphan, as their daughter. Initially following Lestat's more sadistic nature as opposed to Louis' more morose attitude towards the young life and guilt, she begins to resent her eternal childhood and revolts against Lestat's rules, leading her and Louis to kill Lestat and fleeing to Europe. In Paris, they meet Armand, the leader of a group of vampires that are kind of a cross between the casts of Les Mis and Moulin Rouge. Armand wants Louis to join him while warning him that Claudia is considered an illegal vampire due to her age and is in danger. Meanwhile, Claudia wants a mother figure to emulate and convinces Louis to create Madeline as a companion before he sends her away for her safety. Right after he does turn Madeline, the vampire troupe captures the three of them, walls up Louis, and executes Claudia and Madeline via a pit in the sunlight. Armand frees Louis from his Edgar Allan Poe-esque imprisonment, who then goes on to seek revenge and kills the entire nest of vampires, aside from Armand. Louis leaves Europe and returns to New Orleans to discover years later Lestat is living in hiding. As he finishes the interview, Malloy asks Louis to turn him, but Louis refuses and leaves. Driving home over the Golden Gate Bridge, Lestat pops out of Malloy's back seat, attacks the reporter, and gives him the choice to become a vampire or not as the movie ends. Now, this movie floated around development hell for almost 20 years. It was first optioned by Paramount before the novel was even published. With the Reagan years and most of the 80s, the landscape to the media jumped a little bit to the right, and that compounded with the AIDS epidemic, really put a hold on developing a gay romance story by the main studios. And that's probably the main impact of the film. While this version is not quite as explicit with its relationship between Lestat and Louis, and that they gave Louis a dead wife as opposed to a dead brother in the book and the current TV show, it was still very impactful on gay culture like the book before it. And with the A-list stars like Pitt and Cruise in the leads, it drew a lot of attention. And with Neil Jordan's pedigree coming off The Crying Game and being championed by David Geffen, a very powerful gay figure in Hollywood, this movie really spoke to that audience, and I'm not qualified to speak to that beyond just saying that I think it really was impactful at the time. I remember it being impactful. I was in high school. But, looking back on it, it seems so tame. But, thankfully, that's 30 years of cultural development and acceptance. But I really could understand why this was such a big deal, it was still before, Ellen lost her sitcom for coming out as a lesbian, so it was a very important step. It was also really impactful on, the 90s and beyond goth culture and vampire stories that came after it. Yes, gay vampires, sultry, seductive vampires have been a thing, for 150 years, but I think this brought that kind of more to the mainstream, because this isn't really a horror. It's a romance, and I think that's kind of why I avoided it. Not whether it was a gay romance or a straight romance. It's not a movie I think I, as a 14-year-old boy, would have been drawn to. Especially with leads of Pitt, Slater, and Cruise. To me, these were the hot, young, attractive actors. It was targeted to me not as a gay movie, but as a movie to women and young girls. And as a 14-year-old boy, that just wasn't for me. And now I think it's a good movie. I think it can feel a little slow still to me. The plot for 2/3 of the movie feels like it drags until they really get to Europe. It's because it's so much about the personal relationships, and I was expecting at least some horror, like the scenes of them attacking people, because it's from their perspective. It just doesn't seem as impactful. It seems like, yet you understand it's their necessity, not from the not from the perspective of the victims, and that's what takes it out of that horror genre for me. But they did a great job of building these characters and building this world. I just wish there was a little more to the story, to the lore. And honestly, I'm kind of glad they don't go so far into the lore where they have to explain all the rules of being a vampire until they become necessary, like don't drink the blood of the dead, things like that. We're not told for her whole existence that Claudia is this abomination. I mean, we kind of feel it, but we don't get it until almost it comes up. Maybe having that come forward a little earlier, maybe having that be a plot that moves them around, or I don't know. But I mean, this is an allegory for Anne Rice's grief of losing her daughter and her guilt, survivor's guilt, and all that. So that's not the story she wanted to tell, and I think for that kind of story, it does very, very well. As I said, in general, I really like the film, and I can see how important and impactful it was for different people. But it's still not quite what I expected. I said I really expected more out of the horror, a little more explicitness of the relationship because of how it was built up in my mind for these 30 years hearing about this way. And I just don't think it was scary. Like, it just was so built up, there was no way it was going to live up to what I thought. It was a good movie with fantastic acting all around. I mean, Cruise can ham it up a bit, but and Pitt and Slater I do like, and it was just some sort of weird 14-year-old boy rebellion that pushed this movie away from me. But it was Dunst who stole the show. She's just so creepy, menacing, and sympathetic at the same time. It's amazing, and she was so well developed with that. On the other hand, I thought Cruise was the main star. I thought Lestat was the interviewee going in, so his presence in so much less of the film, also because of his billing and his picture on the poster in the box, that's what I thought I was going to expect. So getting what we got really surprised me, and I like the movie. But I'm not going to call it a horror movie. It's a gothic romance more than anything. And I know Lestat gets more, had his own sequel and his own musical, whatever. I'm just talking about this. I haven't watched any of those. I haven't watched the TV series. I'm just talking about this movie and what I've seen. So yes, I do recommend it. And that's going to wrap up my Halloween series. I think next time I'm actually going to kind of do a triple feature. Before I got to the October series, I'd watched these first, so it's going to be a little bit of time removed for me to get to these. But I'm going to do all three of them at once. Richard Linklater's Before series, before sunrise, before sunset, and before midnight. Probably, as one of my friends described, one of the happiest accidents of a trilogy ever made. So that should be coming out next week. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Ron Hasn't Seen. And please like and subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, and I will see you next week.